So just as we see that heidelbergensis looks are kind of intermediate between Homo erectus and us, modern humans, there are some cultural changes also that make them a bit different from erectus and maybe a little more like us. They are still using the same kind of general tool technology. In Europe and Africa, they're still using Acheulean technology. They're still making hand axes, they're still making choppers and cleavers and a bunch of different flake tools. But they do start making some fancier kinds of flake tools. They start using what we call a prepared core technique, also called a Levallois technique. We have a lot of French words in describing stone tools because some of the first archaeologists to start looking at stone tools were French. So what you do is you shape your core of rock into this sort of oval, sometimes called a turtleback shape because it looks kind of like the shell of a turtle. So you have this kind of oval, and then you hit it on one end to take a flake off. So you would hit it here, right there, knock a flake off, and then you can keep knocking multiple flakes off that all end up coming off in a similar size and shape. They're all kind of oval, they're all similar size and shape. These are essentially blanks, and you can turn these blanks into a bunch of different kind of specialized tools. You could blunt off one edge, keep the other edge razor sharp and use it as a knife. You could sharpen it to a point for poking holes in things or engraving things. You can blunt off one edge in kind of a rounded way and turn it into a scraper. We think they're mostly still being used in the hand, though. We don't have a lot of evidence that these are being put into handles of any sort, and we have very little use of preserved bone or ivory or antler or wood used for tools. Maybe a little more than earlier hominins, but of course some of this stuff doesn't survive that well anyway. They're obviously still scavenging. Again, you're not turning your nose up at a nice freshly dead animal that you didn't have to kill. But we do have some evidence suggesting they're doing more big game hunting. A very amazing find was found at a site in Germany, a place called Schöningen, which were wooden spears. Now, normally wood just rots away. These survived because they stayed in a bog. They were in a waterlogged area without a lot of oxygen, and that helps preserve wood. These were between 6 and 7.5 feet long, made out of yew wood, Y-E-W wood, which is very tough, springy wood. And they appear to have been designed for throwing. And remember our discussion of Homo erectus and throwing. Well, these guys can throw too. Also found at the site were other large game animals, including a lot of wild horses, bones with cut marks on them. So these kinds of spears could certainly have been used for hunting those animals. So this is good evidence that they are doing some major hunting and using that throwing ability for hunting. The site in England, Boxgrove, actually produced the shoulder blade of a woolly rhinoceros. Now the bone in a shoulder blade and the scapula is very, very thin, and this had a perfectly round hole punched right through it. Just the right size, right through the middle, where an animal tooth couldn't have made it through and where a spear could have. There's also some evidence, a little bit debated, that heidelbergensis may have been driving some large game animals off of cliffs. On the Channel Island of Jersey, they may have driven some mammoth and rhinoceros off of cliffs or into boggy areas where they get mired down and you can just wait for them to die and finish them off and scavenge them. They clearly are using caves. We find a lot of heidelbergensis remains in caves, and that actually makes them preserve better because caves are great places for preservation. So we do find a lot of caves with heidelbergensis remains in them. They're probably using caves as part of their seasonal movement patterns, and caves would be great places to live in. But we also have the first direct evidence of built shelters. When this site was first discovered, site on the south coast of France, near the Mediterranean, in the city of Nice, it was originally thought to be Homo erectus, but now we're pretty sure it's heidelbergensis. If it's erectus, it's at the very end of erectus. It's more likely heidelbergensis. Looks like a place where heidelbergensis came back seasonally, and they built huts. We find post holes where the wood was driven into the ground, probably covered with animal hides. Inside there were fireplaces, just like what you make when you're camping. You scoop out a little depression in the ground, you put rocks around it, you build your fire in it so they're full of ash and charcoal, and the dirt was baked. In at least one hut, there were even little impressions of animal skins left on the floors, which is pretty amazing. They were eating meat. They were doing some hunting and or scavenging, bringing in animal bones. They were gathering plants. They're near the coast, so they're also using fish and shellfish. And they were bringing stone for making tools from up to 15 miles away, which is farther than we ever saw Homo habilis, or even Homo erectus transporting tool stone. So this is part of the evidence that they're moving seasonally and they're planning ahead. They're planning when they're going to need stone and bringing it with them. There's a little park at the site. I found these pictures online. This is they've reconstructed sort of the framework of one of the huts there based on the kinds of post holes. So you can see the oval. Here's a little diagram of one of these huts, a little smoke hole in the top. We don't know if they had a smoke hole. After all, it's wood. But just so you get a sense of what they might have looked like. Now, we know they're using fire. It's not just at Taramata. We find a number of fire hearths, clearly formally constructed, clearly controlling the use of fire. Whether they were able to make fire when they wanted to or not, we can't tell, but they're able to keep fire going anyway. We find sites with hearths in Israel and Germany, France, Hungary, China. Yeah, they're definitely using fire. They're using it for warmth, for light, for cooking, for keeping predators away, all those good things we talked about before. There's no direct evidence of clothing, but it's very likely. They did have access to animal skins, they're making stone scrapers, and they are living in places even farther north and even colder, with really cold, snowy winters, places that even Homo erectus didn't live in, and they would have needed the extra warmth from animal hide. So that's very, very likely. They obviously have to be living in groups. And sharing labor, and that there's no doubt about that. More like us. And then finally, what about communication? Same kind of thing I talked about with Homo erectus. Remember that flexing at the base of the skull. Heidelbergensis's skull base is just as flexed as ours. That suggests they could make all the same range of sounds we can, including that wider variety of vowel sounds. A lot of the things they're doing, driving mammoths and woolly rhinos, hunting, might actually need better planning and coordination, and that might also mean that they've got more human-like language. They probably, even if they're not speaking exactly the way we do, they almost certainly have more human-like language capabilities, both gestural language and spoken language, than Homo erectus. And everything they're doing really suggests that. Here are some comparisons. This first one I showed you before, the Homo erectus with a pretty flat base of the skull, right across there, pretty flat. This is heidelbergensis, so you can see more flexed. And then we'll be talking later about Neanderthals. Oops, that line's not going quite the right direction. Neanderthals, and then, of course, modern humans. And you can see both Neanderthals and modern humans have flexed base of the skull, like heidelbergensis, and more like us than like erectus. And here are just a few other heidelbergensises for comparison. Here is the heidelbergensis from Cima de los Huesos, one of them. Only one I could find a side-on shot of. So you can see that flexing there, very similar to the cowboy skull. And here's the one from Petralona in Greece, again, more flexed. This one is not as well preserved as the other ones. It's a cast also. It's a replica. So yeah, I drew that line rather poorly too. So, but again, you can see more flexing than in most earlier hominins. So could they talk? Yeah, almost certainly. So I told you I was going to do pretty quick on heidelbergensis. Yeah. Where are we going to head next? So after 200,000 years ago, heidelbergensis are gone. Some people actually even put them going way earlier, between 300,000 and 400,000. And they have three descendants. Neanderthals, the mysterious species that we don't even have a species name for yet, that we just call Denisovans, and anatomically modern humans. Fully modern humans, us, Homo sapiens sapiens. We are going to be exploring all three of these kinds of hominins, probably all subspecies of our species Homo sapiens, in the next couple of weeks. We're going to start next time with Neanderthals. And then we're going to later examine how are Neanderthals related to the Denisovans and to us. Spoiler alert, most of us have some Neanderthal in us. Some of us also have some Denisovan in us. So we interbred with these guys, and that's why we think we're subspecies. So we're going to explore these different kinds of hominins over the next couple of weeks.